At opposite ends of the planet lie two icy worlds that appear identical when viewed from space. However, one is an ocean surrounded by continents, while the other is a continent buried beneath ice. This difference changes everything: climate, life, geology, exploration, and even the future of the planet. The most significant difference between the Arctic and Antarctic begins beneath the ice. In the Arctic, the ocean dominates. Most of the visible ice floats on the sea. Beneath that white blanket lies the Arctic Ocean, a marine basin surrounded by continents. Its sea ice grows during the winter, shrinks during the summer, and forms a dynamic surface that fractures, shifts, and changes thickness with each season. Antarctica presents the opposite reality. Beneath the ice lies solid ground. There is an entire rocky continent with mountain ranges, valleys, volcanoes, plateaus, coastlines, and depressions. The Antarctic ice sheet covers almost all of this landmass and reaches thicknesses of several kilometers in some areas. In certain places, the ice accumulated over hundreds of thousands of years far exceeds the height of many European mountains. This contrast defines the identity of both poles. In the Arctic, sea ice responds rapidly to temperature changes because it floats on water. It forms, breaks up, melts, shifts, and forms again. In Antarctica, much of the ice behaves like a gigantic continental mass. It flows slowly from the interior toward the coast, like a solid substance moving on a geological timescale. When it reaches the sea, it forms floating ice shelves that can extend hundreds of kilometers across the ocean. The difference also affects altitude. The Arctic is largely at sea level. Antarctica, on the other hand, has a very high average elevation due to the thickness of its ice sheet. This altitude contributes to the southern continent being much colder. Air cools as it rises, and in East Antarctica, where the ice plateau rises thousands of meters, temperatures can reach extreme values that make the region the coldest place on Earth. In the Arctic, the ocean partially moderates temperatures. Water stores heat better than continental rock and ice. Although Arctic cold can be brutal, the presence of the sea moderates certain extremes. In the interior of Antarctica, this moderation disappears. The center of the continent is far from the ocean, elevated on an immense ice sheet and subjected to an extremely dry atmosphere. The result is a polar desert colder than any region permanently inhabited by humans. Geography also explains the circulation of heat. In the north, air and water masses can interact with nearby continents. Ocean currents, storms, and atmospheric systems connect the Arctic to temperate regions. In the south, Antarctica is surrounded by the Southern Ocean, a band of turbulent waters that swirls around the continent and acts as a climate barrier. This circumpolar current isolates Antarctica and limits the arrival of warm waters from lower latitudes. From space, both poles appear as white surfaces. From a geological perspective, they are entirely different worlds. The Arctic is an ice-covered expanse over a dark ocean. Antarctica is a continental fortress buried beneath a white dome. This initial difference gives rise to all the others. The Arctic and Antarctic cold may seem like they belong to the same family, but they function very differently. The Arctic is cold because it receives little solar energy for much of the year, because the ice reflects a large amount of radiation, and because it is located at extreme latitudes. Antarctica shares these conditions but adds other decisive factors: altitude, ocean isolation, continentality, and a very dry atmosphere. Antarctica is the coldest, windiest, and driest continent on Earth. This combination seems contradictory when you think of a landscape covered in ice. However, most of the Antarctic interior receives very little precipitation. Technically, large areas function like a desert. The snow that falls accumulates because temperatures are so low that surface melting is minimal in the interior. Over thousands of years, this snow is compressed until it transforms into glacial ice. The Arctic presents a more variable system. Its edges encompass tundra, inhabited coastlines, islands, shallow seas, permafrost, and ecosystems that change dramatically with the seasons. During the summer, many Arctic regions experience surface thaws, plant blooms, intense animal activity, and pronounced biological cycles. Life accelerates during weeks or months of continuous daylight. Then, winter brings back darkness and freezing temperatures. In the interior of Antarctica, surface life almost disappears. The greatest biodiversity is concentrated along the coasts, in the ocean, and in very limited ice-free areas. The center of the continent is more like a natural laboratory of extreme conditions. There, the air can hold so little moisture that certain dry Antarctic valleys are considered some of the most Mars-like environments on Earth. Wind also separates these two worlds. In Antarctica, cold, dense air forms over the interior plateau and descends toward the coast due to gravity. These katabatic winds can reach enormous speeds. They behave like invisible rivers of frigid air flowing down from the interior of the continent toward the ocean. In some coastal regions, the wind is channeled through valleys and slopes, creating conditions capable of carrying away snow, sculpting the ice, and hindering any human activity. The Arctic has storms, blizzards, and violent weather systems, but its dynamics are more closely linked to the ocean and neighboring continents. Warm air can penetrate from the Atlantic or from Siberia. Relatively warm water masses can alter the extent of sea ice. Currents and atmospheric patterns in the northern hemisphere directly influence the evolution of the ice cap. Another profound difference appears in the response to climate change. The Arctic is warming at a very accelerated rate due to Arctic amplification. When sea ice shrinks, the dark ocean is exposed and absorbs more solar radiation. This additional energy warms the water, slows ice formation, and reinforces the process. It is a very powerful feedback loop. Antarctica responds in a more complex way. Some areas, especially the Antarctic Peninsula and parts of West Antarctica, have shown signs of significant warming and ice loss. Other regions in the eastern interior behave more stably or exhibit less direct variations. The enormous continental mass, altitude, winds, and the Southern Ocean generate a less uniform response than that of the Arctic. The climatic mystery of these two extremes lies in the fact that both influence the entire planet, albeit through different pathways. The Arctic affects atmospheric patterns, ocean circulation, shipping routes, ecosystems in the northern hemisphere, and carbon reserves frozen in the permafrost. Antarctica contains enough ice to profoundly alter global sea levels if large areas become unstable. One acts as a sensitive regulator in the north. The other holds a frozen reserve capable of reshaping the world's coastlines. Polar life reveals another essential difference. In the Arctic, there are large terrestrial mammals, human populations, tundra vegetation, and an ecological network connected to nearby continents. In Antarctica, terrestrial life is scarce, limited, and almost always microscopic or coastal. The greatest biological abundance depends on the ocean. The most emblematic animal of the Arctic is the polar bear. Its presence encapsulates the nature of the North, a terrestrial predator adapted to hunting on sea ice. The polar bear depends on frozen platforms to reach seals, its primary food source. Its body, blubber, fur, sense of smell, and behavior are all linked to a landscape that changes with the seasons. When the ice retreats, its access to prey diminishes. In Antarctica, the most recognizable symbol is the penguin. Unlike the polar bear, the penguin belongs to a marine-centric ecology. It breeds on land or ice, but feeds in the ocean. Its streamlined body, wings transformed into flippers, and ability to dive connect it to waters rich in krill, fish, and squid. Antarctica has large colonies of emperor, adelie, and other penguin species that depend on marine productivity. The reason there are polar bears in the north and penguins in the south is linked to evolution and isolation. The Arctic connects to continents where land mammals were able to expand and adapt to the cold. The ancestors of polar bears evolved from brown bears in the northern hemisphere. Antarctica, on the other hand, remained isolated by oceans for millions of years. Large land mammals reached other continents, but the Southern Ocean blocked their advance to the White Continent. Penguins evolved in the southern hemisphere and found in Antarctica and its surrounding areas an environment without native terrestrial predators equivalent to those in the Arctic. This isolation allowed for the formation of enormous colonies. On land, their main threats come from birds, weather conditions, and changes in the ice, while at sea they face leopard seals, orcas, and other predators. The vegetation shows an equally clear difference. In the Arctic, there is tundra. During the summer, Mosses, lichens, grasses, small flowers, and low shrubs take advantage of the brief period of daylight and less extreme temperatures. The ground remains frozen deep in many regions, forming permafrost, but the surface layer can thaw enough to support plant life. This vegetation feeds insects, migratory birds, caribou, musk oxen, Arctic hares, and other animals. In Antarctica, terrestrial vegetation is minimal. Mosses, lichens, algae, and only a few flowering plants exist in relatively mild areas of the Antarctic Peninsula. Most of the continent lacks developed soil, available moisture, and temperatures suitable for complex vegetation. Terrestrial life takes refuge in crevices, exposed rocks, sediments, subglacial lakes, or microenvironments where solar radiation, humidity, and minerals allow for limited biological activity. The ocean, however, transforms Antarctica into one of the most productive marine systems on the planet. Antarctic krill form enormous concentrations that feed whales, seals, penguins, fish, and seabirds. This abundance arises from the combination of cold waters, nutrients, seasonal sunlight, and ocean circulation. In the austral summer, when the sun illuminates the ocean for extended periods, phytoplankton proliferates and sustains a vast food chain. The Arctic also possesses very rich marine ecosystems. Whales, walruses, seals, fish, birds, and microorganisms depend on sea ice, coastal margins, and seasonal productivity. However, their relationship with the surrounding land is closer. Vast rivers flow into the Arctic Ocean, bringing fresh water, sediment, and nutrients. Human communities have hunted, fished, and traveled through these regions for thousands of years. Polar life tells two distinct stories. In the north, life intertwines with continents, land migrations, human populations, and a shifting, ice-covered ocean. In the south, life is concentrated at the boundary between ice and sea, while the continental interior remains one of the most barren and extreme regions on the planet. The Arctic has been part of human history for thousands of years. Indigenous peoples have inhabited its coasts, tundras, and islands through profound adaptation to the cold, seasonal darkness, and animal cycles. Inuit, Sami, Nenets, Chukchi, and other peoples developed technologies, routes, dwellings, tools, languages, and forms of knowledge linked to ice, snow, wind, reindeer, seals, fish, and whales. This human presence makes the Arctic a cultural, political, and economic region. There are cities, ports, military bases, mines, pipelines, air routes, coastal settlements, and national territories. Russia, Canada, the United States, Norway, Denmark via Greenland, Iceland, Sweden, and Finland have direct ties to the Arctic region. The polar north is part of their maps, economies, and strategies. Antarctica presents a different reality. There are scientific stations, temporary camps, and logistical bases, but it lacks a permanent native population. No civilization arose on the Antarctic continent because its isolation, climate, and geography prevented early human settlement. The arrival of explorers, whalers, and scientists occurred much later compared to the Arctic. Modern Antarctic history is marked by extreme exploration. During the 19th and 20th centuries, expeditions from various countries sought to map the coastlines, reach the South Pole, and understand the continent. Names like Amundsen, Scott, and Shackleton became associated with journeys where distance, cold, hunger, crevasses, and storms made every decision a matter of survival. Antarctica became a frontier of human endurance and later a global scientific laboratory. The Antarctic Treaty, signed in 1959 and in force since 1961, established a unique status. Antarctica is primarily dedicated to science and international cooperation. Territorial claims exist, but the treaty froze their practical dispute and prohibited offensive military activities. This structure has made the continent a unique space within world politics. While the Arctic is surrounded by states with direct interests, Antarctica functions as a territory regulated by international agreements. This human difference influences how both poles are studied and exploited. The Arctic contains communities that experience the consequences of climate change directly. Melting ice alters hunting routes, the stability of homes, safety on the ice, erodes coastlines, and affects access to resources. In some areas, permafrost thaws, impacting roads, buildings, pipelines, and cemeteries. Polar change becomes an everyday experience. In Antarctica, the human presence is concentrated in scientific stations. There, glaciers, the atmosphere, astronomy, biology, seismology, meteorites, paleoclimate, and marine ecosystems are studied. The continent holds invaluable natural archives. Ice cores extracted from the Antarctic ice sheet contain bubbles of ancient air that allow scientists to reconstruct the atmospheric composition of hundreds of thousands of years ago. Each layer of compacted snow acts as a page of Earth's climate. The Arctic is also intensively studied, but its relationship with the global economy is more immediate. The retreat of sea ice opens debates about trade routes such as the Northern Sea Route and the Northwest Passage. Interest in hydrocarbons, minerals, fishing, and strategic control is also increasing. This transformation makes the Arctic a region of both opportunities and tensions. Antarctica holds resources, but its international protection limits their exploitation. Its main value, at least at this stage of history, lies in science, climate, and conservation. In this sense, the two poles show two opposing models of human relationship. The Arctic as a lived-in, disputed, and transformed territory. Antarctica as a scientific continent, isolated and protected by fragile but extraordinary agreements. Polar ice holds information. Every snowfall on a cold region can preserve chemical signatures, volcanic particles, dust, air bubbles, isotopes, and traces of past atmospheric conditions. Over time, these layers compress and form a natural archive that allows us to read the planet's climatic past. Antarctica possesses the deepest and oldest archive. Its ice sheets can preserve information from hundreds of thousands of years ago, and even older ice is being sought. Bubbles trapped in the ice show how carbon dioxide, methane, and other atmospheric gases varied. The relationship between greenhouse gases and temperature is inscribed in these cylinders extracted from great depths. The Arctic also preserves climate archives in Greenland, in glaciers, marine sediments, permafrost, and lakes. Greenland, although geographically linked to the Arctic, contains a large continental ice sheet that allows us to reconstruct abrupt climate changes in the Northern Hemisphere. Their records have revealed rapid variations that occurred in the past when the climate system changed intensely on relatively short timescales. The difference lies in stability and scale. The Antarctic ice sheet is larger, older, and more massive. The Greenland ice sheet is smaller, but crucial for understanding the Arctic and sea level. Arctic sea ice, on the other hand, functions less as a deep archive and more as a sensitive indicator of the present. Its extent, thickness, and age reflect recent changes in the climate system. The future of sea level depends largely on continental ice, not floating sea ice. When Arctic sea ice melts, its direct effect on sea level is limited because that ice is already floating. The main problem lies in the loss of reflectivity, the disruption of ecosystems, and the acceleration of regional warming. When the continental ice sheets of Greenland or Antarctica melt, the water that was stored on land enters the ocean and raises sea levels. Antarctica poses the greatest potential threat due to the enormous volume of ice it holds. East Antarctica possesses a vast and largely very cold mass. West Antarctica, on the other hand, is of particular concern because some of its ice rests on bedrock below sea level. This configuration can promote instability when relatively warm waters reach the base of the ice shelves. Floating ice shelves act as buttresses. Although already above water, they slow the flow of continental glaciers into the sea. When these shelves thin or collapse, the glaciers that fed them can accelerate their discharge. This dynamic is closely observed in regions like the Thwaites Glacier, sometimes described as one of the most closely watched areas of the cryosphere. Its behavior matters because it is part of a system capable of influencing sea level for centuries. In the Arctic, permafrost poses another threat. Its frozen soil contains vast amounts of organic matter accumulated over thousands of years. When it thaws, microorganisms begin to decompose this matter, releasing carbon dioxide and methane. This process can amplify warming. Furthermore, thawing permafrost alters entire landscapes, creating subsidence, thermokarst lakes, landslides, and damage to infrastructure. Polar ice thus serves as both a memory and a warning. In Antarctica, the ice holds a profound record of climate and a reservoir capable of altering future coastlines. In the Arctic, ice and permafrost are showing a rapid response to current warming. One preserves the past on a monumental scale. The other reveals the present with unsettling speed. The poles are also distinguished by their hidden mysteries. Antarctica, being a continent buried under kilometers of ice, preserves invisible landscapes. Beneath the white surface lie mountains, canyons, basins, subglacial rivers, and lakes sealed for long periods. One of the most famous examples is Lake Vostok, an enormous body of liquid water trapped under the East Antarctic ice sheet. The existence of subglacial lakes demonstrates that even on the coldest continent, liquid water can exist beneath the ice. Pressure, geothermal heat, and thermal insulation allow certain environments to remain thawed. These lakes are of interest to science because they could contain microorganisms adapted to extreme and isolated conditions. They also serve as an analogy for icy worlds in the solar system, such as Europa or Enceladus, moons where the existence of oceans beneath ice sheets is suspected. Antarctica also conceals entire mountain ranges. The Gamburtsev Mountains, buried beneath the ice of East Antarctica, puzzled scientists for decades because they lie deep within the continent, far from any obvious active tectonic boundaries. Their existence suggests complex geological histories, ancient uplifts, and processes frozen beneath the white ice sheet. Furthermore, Antarctica is home to volcanoes. Mount Erebus, on Ross Island, is one of the southernmost active volcanoes on the planet and contains a persistent lava lake. Beneath the ice of West Antarctica lie other volcanic structures that may influence basal heating and the dynamics of some glaciers. The image of a completely static continent is transformed when this deep, hot, and partially hidden geology is revealed. The Arctic holds different kinds of mysteries. Beneath its ocean lie mid-ocean ridges, deep basins, continental shelves, and areas still difficult to study. The Lomonosov Ridge, a submarine structure that crosses the Arctic Ocean, has had scientific and geopolitical importance because it helps us understand the region's tectonic history and is related to claims over the seabed. The Arctic floor is not a simple plain, but a submerged territory with mountains, fractures, and signs of ancient continental drift. The Arctic also holds mysteries in its permafrost. Pleistocene animals, such as woolly mammoths, woolly rhinoceroses, ancient bison, and other remains, have been found frozen in Siberia, Alaska, and Canada. Some preserve tissue, hair, organs, and stomach contents. These findings allow us to reconstruct vanished ecosystems and study a world where megafauna roamed the cold steppes that now seem impossible. In Antarctica, fossils tell an even more astonishing story. The White Continent was once part of Gondwana and had much more temperate climates. Remains of plants, ancient forests, and animals have been found, revealing a past where Antarctica was far from its current state. This evidence shows that the frozen continent was once a landscape teeming with life before drifting toward the South Pole and becoming trapped by oceanic and atmospheric changes. The difference between these two mysteries is profound. The Arctic conceals the recent past of a cold world inhabited by large mammals and connected to the northern continents. Antarctica hides a continent lost beneath the ice, with invisible mountains, sealed lakes, and traces of ancient forests. One resembles a frozen ocean with the memory of extinct animals. The other resembles a planet buried within a planet. The Arctic and Antarctica influence the Earth system in complementary ways. Both participate in regulating global climate, reflect solar radiation, affect ocean currents, and store frozen water. However, each occupies a different position within the planetary machinery. The Arctic functions as a region of intense exchange between ocean, atmosphere, and continents. Its sea ice acts as a lid that partially separates the ocean from the air. When that lid shrinks, heat and moisture pass more easily into the atmosphere. This can alter pressure patterns, cloud cover, storms, and atmospheric circulation. Ice loss also reduces albedo, the ability to reflect sunlight. Antarctica functions as a major cold stabilizer for the southern hemisphere. Its ice sheet raises the surface, cools the air, and fuels winds that flow toward the coast. The Southern Ocean, which surrounds it, connects the Atlantic, Indian, and Pacific Oceans. Its waters absorb heat and carbon and participate in the formation of deep water masses that travel around the planet for centuries. The Antarctic circumpolar current is one of the key elements. By encircling the continent without significant continental interruptions, it keeps Antarctica isolated from warmer waters. This circulation contributed to the consolidation of its glaciation in the geological past. In the Arctic, the opposite situation prevails. Continents enclose the ocean, straits control water exchange, and connections with the Atlantic and Pacific are limited but crucial. The Arctic also receives large rivers. The Lena, Yenisei, Ob, Mackenzie, and other river systems discharge freshwater into the polar ocean. This influx modifies salinity, influences water stratification, and affects ice formation. Antarctica, lacking large, permanent rivers on its surface, delivers freshwater primarily through glacial melt, iceberg carving, and subglacial discharge. Icebergs represent another visual and dynamic difference. In the Arctic, many icebergs originate from Greenland and island glaciers. In Antarctica, carving can reach gigantic dimensions because the ice shelves form enormous surfaces. Some Antarctic icebergs are larger than cities or even entire regions. Their drift across the Southern Ocean transports fresh water, minerals, and temporary habitats for organisms. On a planetary scale, the Arctic acts as a rapid indicator of climate imbalance. It changes with visible speed. Antarctica acts as a slow, massive, and potentially decisive reservoir. Its changes may unfold over centuries, but their consequences are global in scale. Earth needs both poles to maintain balances that seem invisible in everyday life. The light they reflect, the water they freeze, the currents they drive, and the gases they store are all part of an interconnected system. When the poles shift, the rest of the planet responds. The Arctic and Antarctica appear to be sister regions because they are both located at the Earth's extremes and both are dominated by ice. However, their visual similarity masks a fundamental opposition. The Arctic is a frozen ocean surrounded by continents. Antarctica is a frozen continent surrounded by ocean. This geographical reversal explains almost everything. In the north, the sea occupies the center. The ice floats, shifts with the seasons, and connects ecosystems, human settlements, shipping lanes, natural resources, and national territories. The Arctic is part of the living history of many communities and is rapidly transforming in the face of global warming. Its sea, ice, permafrost, and coastlines show visible changes in just a few decades. In the south, land occupies the center. Antarctica rises as a continental mass covered by kilometers of ice, isolated by the Southern Ocean, and dominated by extreme conditions. Its interior is colder, drier, and higher than the Arctic. Its human presence is concentrated in science, and its geopolitical value is contained by international agreements that make it a unique natural laboratory. Life itself makes a difference. The Arctic has polar bears, tundra, caribou, indigenous peoples, and an ecology connected to the northern continents. Antarctica has penguins, krill, seals, whales, extreme microorganisms, and coastlines where the ocean sustains most life. The absence of large native terrestrial predators in the south and the continental connection of the north explain two opposing evolutionary histories. Beneath the ice, each region holds distinct secrets. The Arctic preserves megafauna remains, largely unexplored ocean floors, and carbon-rich frozen soils. Antarctica hides mountains, subglacial lakes, volcanoes, dry valleys, and traces of a verdant past buried beneath the planet's largest ice sheet. The difference between the two poles is, ultimately, a lesson about Earth. Position, geology, the ocean, the atmosphere, and life produce entirely different worlds, even under the same white surface. The Arctic and Antarctica are the extremes of the map, but they are also the extremes of the same question. How can a planet create two ice kingdoms so similar at first glance and so opposite in their true nature?